Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Wealth and Wisdom. Today we continue with the critique of usury throughout history. Various reasons and rationale have been forwarded in support of this position. While some are unique to particular traditions or individuals, many tread on common ground. In the past, the Christian Church's simplest and perhaps earliest objection to usury was on the basis that it constituted unearned income, an idea that stemmed from its general doctrine of just price. The Lutheran Council of 1515 clearly expressed such a view of the Church. This is the proper interpretation of usury when gain is sought to be acquired from the use of a thing, not in itself fruitful, such as a flock or a field, without labor, expense or risk on the part of the lender. This is also the rationale used to explain why in Islam God permits trade yet forbids usury. The difference is that profits are the result of initiative, enterprise and efficiency. They result after a definite value-creating process. Not so with interest, also interest is fixed, profit fluctuates. In the case of interest you know your return and can be sure of it. In the case of profit you have to work to ensure it. Perhaps Aristotle had similar sentiments in mind when he argued that a piece of money cannot beget another. Hence, at a fundamental level of analysis, the so-called evils of usury must be understood as being connected with money being a social psychological construct legitimized by the power dynamics of a given political economy, which may or may not be democratically and consciously legitimized. An illustration of this understanding can be seen in the Christian tradition where Jesus, peace be upon him, is asked whether taxes should be paid to Caesar. Before uttering the famous words, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's," he tellingly first asks to be shown a coin and inquires, "Whose image and superscription hath it?" Luke 20:24. In other words, what power structure legitimizes this currency? Jesus' response therefore said much more than merely pay your taxes. It invited questioning of the very psycho-spiritual power dynamics that constitute the deep roots of human relationship in economy, and which have always caused matters of political economy to be central to prophetic witness. Usury is what marks the distinction between money being simply a socially contracted abstract mechanism, to lubricate between supply and demand, and money as an end in itself. As an end in itself, as a social commodity legitimized through usury to tax other economic activity, the honest process of living by the sweat of one's brow is short-circuited. The true dignity and full reward of ordinary labor is compromised. Money thus becomes a self-perpetuating power in itself rather than just a mediating agent of power. And it is the relentlessness of compound interest in the face of adversity that sets the potential cruelty of usury apart from equity-based return on investment. It is the love of money as an end in itself, not the use of money itself, that is said to be the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6. It was in recognition of the need to have corrective feedback mechanisms that Islam not only injuncts usury, but also imposes zakat or wealth tax. And more radical still, the Old Testament proposes a complete economic readjustment through the Jubilee process every 50 years, Leviticus 25, though there is no evidence that such whole-scale redistribution of wealth in all forms was ever actually carried out. Perhaps it is a prophetic vision whose time has yet to come. A slightly more obscure rationale was employed by the Church later in the Middle Ages in order to strengthen its anti-usury doctrine. Drawing on some of the concepts of civil law, it argued that money was a consumable good, fungible, for which the ownership passed from lender to borrower in the course of the loan transaction, with the fair price of sale therefore being the exact amount of the money advanced. Hence to ask for more in the form of interest was illegal and immoral, like selling a loaf of bread and then charging in addition for the use of it. Or, we can say to sell the same thing twice. Another critique and reason for the condemnation of usury is due to the charging of high loans to the poor and destitute. This is a recurring theme in several traditions. This is clearly the contextual meaning of the Judaic biblical passages in Exodus and Leviticus, and perhaps the original target of the medieval usury laws was the medieval equivalent of the loan shark, but that, the medieval theory was unsatisfactory because it could not distinguish the helpful loan from the oppressive. So, usury is a mechanism for the inequitable distribution of wealth. The observation that usury acts as a mechanism by which the rich get richer and the poor get poorer is common to several traditions. Islam rejects financial interest on the basis that it contradicts the principle of distributive equity which its political economy strives to enshrine. Interest in any amount acts in transferring wealth from the asset-less section of the population. The psychological effect of this on the relatively poor can be seen to be magnified when merely quantitative evaluation of transfers from poor to rich is superseded by consideration of the qualitative cost of such a wealth transfer. For the relatively rich, the utility gain provided by usury is marginal to the already substantial utility of the principal sum. The principle of the diminishing marginal utility of wealth therefore applies to each incremental unit of wealth procured by interest earnings. The poor, however, experience the converse of this. For them, the loss in utility incurred by having to pay interest is qualitatively much greater than the gain to the rich. Each unit of interest paid incurs increasing marginal utility loss. Permitting usury to operate in an economy therefore reduces overall utility in the economy. This must count as one of the strongest arguments against usury. Any justification of it as an efficient economic instrument would have to first demonstrate that it functions to increase total utility. In the absence of such demonstration, it can justifiably be condemned as a tool of tyranny. If you learned something today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.